Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining today's workshop. I'm Sean Spivey, Chief of Staff and Senior Counsel to the FCC's Broadband Data Task Force. On November 18th, the FCC published a pre-production draft of its national broadband map of fixed and mobile broadband availability data collected through the Broadband Data Collection. Our publication of these maps also marked the beginning of the process for submitting challenges to the broadband availability data. Individuals can challenge the fixed availability data reported at a location by visiting broadbandmap.gov from a computer or mobile device, typing their address into the search by address bar, and then clicking the availability challenge link on the right-hand side of the map. But entities can also submit challenges to availability data for multiple locations through a bulk fixed availability challenge submission. Both individual and bulk availability challenges will help to refine and validate the data shown on the maps, which will provide better data to the FCC, NTIA, and other stakeholders about where broadband services are and are not available, and inform decisions on where and how to commit broadband infrastructure funding in the future. Today's workshop is focused on how to prepare and submit bulk challenges to fixed availability data. We will begin today's workshop with a few short presentations. The first presentation will provide an overview of what fixed availability data is, including how to download it from the FCC's website and how to associate availability data back to information about broadband serviceable locations, or BSLs. The second presentation will discuss bulk fixed availability challenge methodologies and formatting requirements for bulk challenge data. And the third presentation will cover what to expect after submitting a bulk fixed availability challenge. But we also want to make sure we hear from you. We have reserved time for questions after the presentations. Please email your questions to bdcwebinar@fcc.gov or utilize the Q&A function on the Zoom platform. We will do our best to answer as many of your questions as time allows. If we are unable to answer a specific question today, you may submit your question via the FCC's BDC Help Center at fcc.gov/broadbanddata/help. You can find additional information and resources in the BDC Help Center, as well as a detailed user guide for the BDC system, including sections on the challenge submission portion of the system. The BDC Help Center website will be regularly updated with additional resources and FAQs, and I would encourage you to visit the website often throughout this process. We appreciate you taking the time to participate in this workshop and hope that it will be helpful as you prepare to submit fixed availability challenge data as part of the BDC process. With that, let's start our first presentation. I'm going to now turn it over to Chelsea Fallon, Chief of the Data Division of the FCC's Office of Economics and Analytics, and Senior Implementation Officer for the Broadband Data Task Force. Over to you, Chelsea.
Thank you, Sean. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so hopefully that worked. So I think so I imagine most of you are familiar with the national broadband map at this point, but I will give you a quick tour. So the broadband map shows the locations that fixed broadband providers report offering service to. And so if you enter an address from the homepage of the map, which I'm going to do here, and I'm going to use the street address for the FCC headquarters. In Washington, D.C. So when you enter an address from the home page, the map will show the point on the map. So here that is. And Then to the right, the list of broadband providers that report offering mass market service to that building or structure highlighted on the map. And so the red and green points on the map represent broadband serviceable locations from the FCC's Fabric dataset, which are structures or buildings that have or could have a mass market broadband internet connection to them. And so, as Sean mentioned, if individual users of the map believe that the information here reported by broadband providers for a particular location is inaccurate, they can click this availability challenge link and fill out the form that follows. And this is a quick and easy way for individual consumers to submit a challenge. But for parties interested in submitting bulk fixed availability challenges, you're probably going to want to download larger data files from the map. So here I've shifted to the data download tab of the map. And so here the data is basically divided into different sections because if one were to access all of the data for every location across the country for every provider, it would be more than 1 billion records. So here the map directs users to filter the data by different elements so that the files are a little more manageable. So you can initially select data by state or data by provider. And if you go with data by state, you just select a state from the dropdown. And then from here, you'll be able to download the fixed availability location data for that state. And then from here, you basically select a particular technology and click the download button. Now, if you were to go with data by provider, you could search for a provider, and then you would be able to download all of their fixed availability data for the entire country. And so first I want to note that even though these data files available for download here by state and technology, or by provider, are more manageable than the full nationwide data set, they are still quite large. In many cases, they would be too large to open and work with in Excel. So users should plan to work with them in some form of database or data analytics software. And so when you look at or start working with the downloaded availability data by state, I'm going to bring up a list of the fields that you will see. And so this is the list of fields. This is taken from the data download specification, and you can access this from the data download page on the broadband map, this document. And so I want to note a couple things about the data files and these fields. So one is that you can do additional filtering once you have the data file. You can filter for particular provider ID or brand name. You can filter by the speed, the business residential code. And then you can also use this block GeoID field to filter for particular census geographies. So this has the full 15-digit code for a census block. If you're interested in filtering for a particular county, the first 5 digits of that string correspond to the FIPS code for a particular county. So that's a way you can filter the data by county, and then that will give you a smaller subset of the data that it could be easier to work with and review. And I wanted to note that for parties that are interested in accessing just the locations in a state that are considered served for the purposes of the NTIA BEAD program. So first of all, you wouldn't need to download the data by state for certain technologies. You could ignore the 2 satellite technologies as well as the data available for unlicensed fixed wireless. Then for the remaining technology files that you would download, you can filter those by the reported maximum advertised upload and download speeds. And so that would be the 25 and 3 for the unserved locations, and then 100 by 20 for the underserved. So the other thing I wanted to note is that the data download file, it does include the unique location ID that identifies the location. However, it does not include the address or the geographic coordinates for that location. You can see the address on the map, but it is not included in the download file. So in order to obtain that additional information in a large file, as well as potentially additional data about each location, you would need to have access to the Fabric data set. And this can be obtained by executing a Fabric license agreement with the FCC's Fabric contractor, CostWest. And there are slightly different license categories and processes for obtaining the Fabric license, depending on whether you are an ISP, a governmental entity, or another third party. And there are articles here on the FCC's BDC Help Center website, and that URL Sean mentioned is fcc.gov/broadbanddata/help. And from there, there's a link to the location Fabric. And so here's some overview articles on go through the processes step by step for obtaining access to the Fabric. And then once a party has access to the Fabric data set, these are the fields that they would be able to see for a particular location ID. And so here is, the address, the unit count, building type code, land use code, and the geographic coordinates. And again, also that block geo ID is here as well. This is also another article from our Help Center website on what is the Location Fabric. So I wanted to show this because I wanted to show users that they can match the information that they download about locations that are considered served on the availability data from the broadband map with the information in the Fabric using this location ID and joining the 2 data sets using that field. And so that is, an overview of how to access the availability data in bulk from the broadband map and how to match it up with additional information in the Fabric that can be useful in filing bulk availability challenges. Now I will turn it over to Kirk Berge, who will discuss the bulk fixed availability challenge data and the methodology options and some additional information. Thank you.
Thanks, Chelsea, and good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I'm going to talk about a few things, as Chelsea mentioned, how to collect the data that's needed and how to be most effective in submitting bulk challenges, including approaches to follow or avoid, and some tips based on some things we've seen so far. So there's three categories of bulk challenge, and each depending on the basis of the challenge. So there's knowledge of infrastructure, in which challengers have options for how they collect information on where network facilities and plant exists, such that availability cannot be available as reported on the BDC. And this could include things like local building permit records, rights-of-way records, franchise agreements, and on-the-ground examinations of broadband infrastructure. If you create a GIS data set for examples that I just provided, for example, a map of a right-of-way in a GIS software program, you may be able to create an overlay of the availability data and then identify the areas where the reported services don't align with the infrastructure data. Just one possibility. Second category of bulk challenges is information collected from individual consumers, which is, as it sounds, a bulk challenge in which the challenger collects information required for individual challenges directly from consumers and submits them as one challenge, one bulk challenge in the system. And the third category is the other challenge option, and that's essentially those for any challenges that don't fit in one of the first two categories. This is it's a relatively broad in terms of what can be submitted, but please note that challenges, like all challenges, bulk and otherwise, need to be based on a sound methodology and have a solid factual foundation. So this, although there's flexibility in this option, it's not an invitation to submit something speculative or something like that. So how to be most effective in a bulk challenge. So details are key. It's important to provide sufficient details so that we and the relevant providers can understand the basis of your challenge. Please be complete and accurate and thorough as possible, and try to look at it with the eye of someone who is not familiar with the circumstances that give rise to the challenge. For the knowledge of infrastructure option, we recommend that you submit a detailed and helpful evidence file demonstrating why you contend there's no broadband availability at the disputed locations. And please include a thorough and accurate description of the evidence, what it shows, and how you collected that evidence. For example, challenges based on an exclusive franchise or right-of-way agreement with a locality should include a copy of the agreement and details about how it excludes the possibility of another provider serving the challenged locations. If you are submitting diagrams, maps, photos, or other visual representations of an area, you should include legends, labels, or other explanatory information so that the provider and the commission staff can readily understand what they represent and how they're relevant to your challenge. For the information collected from individual consumers option, submit the information gathered from consumers, ensuring that all of the individual submissions associated with the challenge contain all required evidence showing no broadband availability, or if your challenge is based on something else like technology codes, that it includes the evidence required for that. So some things to avoid: submitting conclusory and unsupported statements as evidence, passing along challenge information provided by individual consumers without reviewing, for example, if the information contains obvious errors or doesn't form the basis of a valid challenge. For example, it's really a consumer complaint about existing service instead of an availability challenge. We recommend that you look through what you're submitting to exclude those types of elements. And with regard to what we've seen already, we think it's important to keep in mind a couple of things. So you should ensure that the challenge is for a valid reason. This isn't the challenge process isn't the forum for consumer complaints about services that they're receiving. It's about whether the service is offered by a provider. You should be as detailed and on point about the evidence supporting your challenge. If you're not sufficiently detailed and we're not able to understand from our initial review what you're saying and the basis for it, it very likely will be rejected. So avoiding errors when uploading. Make sure the file upload of your bulk challenge is properly formatted. Follow the instructions on our document directed to that, entitled Specifications for Bulk Fixed Availability Challenge and Crowdsourced Data. I think we can put that in the chat, or it's certainly available on the Broadband Data website. Common formatting errors include submitting in a non-comma separated value format, not including the required header row, not including all of the required information for all of the challenge locations, not including the vintage of the fabric associated with the fixed availability challenge about which the challenge information is being submitted. That is, if you're submitting a challenge or crowdsource information about the fixed availability data as of June 30, you must use the location IDs associated with the version of the fabric that was used in connection with that collection. And in submitting challenge data about a particular location for more than one reason, be sure to add be sure to enter an additional record for that location ID and enter the additional category code associated with that location. So what happens after a bulk challenge is submitted? There is an initial review phase in which the commission staff will conduct a high-level review to determine whether the challenge presents any obvious defects or deficiencies. This can take a few days to complete, and once it is complete, the challenges will either be rejected or accepted for continued processing. They may be rejected at this phase if they appear to be a complaint about quality of service or billing issues or things like that, or if it seems that the bulk challenges are really fabric location challenges, or if the description or the evidence provided doesn't sufficiently describe or explain the basis for the challenge. When bulk challenges are accepted, they are transmitted to the provider for a response. They have 60 days, that the provider has 60 days to respond either by disputing or accepting the challenge in whole or in part. If your challenge is accepted, you'll get an email notification from the FCC explaining that the provider has been notified about it and providing you with a unique identifier and other information about the challenge. As I indicated, that the provider then has 60 days to review and respond to the challenge by conceding or denying the allegations. Providers may concede or deny the challenge with regard to some or all of the locations in a bulk challenge. To the extent that providers concede with regard to a location, then they must revise their data consistent with the terms of the challenge. If a provider concedes a challenge for all locations in the challenge, then the process ends for that challenge once the data are updated accordingly. You'll get a second email once the provider concedes or rebuts your challenge, notifying you of the provider's action. And this initiates a second up to 60-day period for provider the provider and the challenger to engage in a dialogue in an effort to try to resolve the challenge, either in whole or in part. If the provider rebuts the challenge, we expect them to contact you directly to try to resolve the challenge. We ask that parties approach this process constructively and that they share information with each other that may be helpful in resolving the challenge, and otherwise work to find areas of mutual agreement to the extent that's possible. To the extent that challengers and providers can reach agreement on the challenge locations, the challenge will end or the provider will revise its data for those locations depending on the outcome of the agreement. If the parties reach agreement on all locations, the challenge will end completely, subject to any data revisions that are required. So FCC adjudication of unresolved challenges, those challenges that are not resolved at any of the prior stages will come to the FCC for resolution. The providers are responsible for reporting the status of the challenge for those that don't resolve by the end of the second 60-day period. And that could include reporting a partial or a complete resolution on the part of the parties. The FCC will then review the evidence that's been submitted in the course of the challenge and make a determination on each of the disputed locations within 90 days, either finding in favor of the bulk challenger, in which case the provider must update its data within 30 days with respect to a location, or in favor of the provider, in which case the location will no longer be considered challenge, and the pending challenge will no longer display on the national broadband map. You'll receive a follow-up email notification once the FCC has made a final decision on the challenge. If a provider concedes or does not respond to or fails to rebut a challenge, it has 30 days to update its broadband availability data so that the challenge service will no longer be shown as available for the relevant location or area on the map. You can also check the status of a challenge by visiting the challenged location on the national broadband map and clicking on the number next to availability challenge up to the right of the location information. So with that, I think we'll begin our question and answer period. I think I'll send it back to Sean to start that.
Thanks, Kirk. And thanks, Chelsea, for those presentations. And we received quite a few questions, but please continue to send them in the Q&A box or to bdcwebinar@fcc.gov by email. Again, we're going to try and get through as many as we can in the next 31 minutes. So the first question is for you, Chelsea. What is the deadline for submitting fixed availability challenges?
Thank you, Sean. Sorry. So there is no set deadline. We will accept fixed availability challenges on a rolling basis. And the FCC plans to regularly refresh the data shown on the broadband map based on the results of fixed availability challenges that are either conceded or resolved. And we encourage entities to file their challenges as soon as they are able to do so.
Thanks, Chelsea. The next question is for you, Kirk. What's the difference between a bulk fixed challenge and a bulk fixed crowdsourced data submission?
They are similar. Probably the main difference is that a challenge will necessarily result in a resolution of some type. It's a more formal process with burdens of proof and timeframes. Crowdsourcing, in contrast, is a less formal, more open process through which information can be submitted to inform our understanding of the availability data and can be used in connection with things like further verification, outreach to filers, audits and investigations, but crowdsourced information does not directly lead to a change in the map as challenges may if they're upheld.
Thanks, Kirk. I think I can take the next couple of questions. The first one is, I'm not a provider or a governmental entity. How can I access the broadband serviceable location fabric? We are now making available to any entity that wants to participate in the BDC process, fabric data. There is a process for obtaining a fabric license. It is a $0 no cost license agreement. And again, the permitted use is restricted to participation in the BDC process. So you can't really use the data for commercial purposes. But the first step would be to obtain an FRN, an FCC registration number, and register in the BDC system. And once you do that, the information is passed on to our third-party vendor, and they will contact you to get you a license agreement for the fabric. We have an article online that explains each of those steps in more detail, and I think we can probably drop a link to that article in the chat. We received another question. Would it be possible for the FCC to add latitude and longitude for each location ID to the CSV file reports that are available for download from the site. Latitude and longitude are elements of the fabric. To the extent you want to join latitude and longitude for unique location IDs in the availability data, you can execute a fabric license agreement. As I said, that license agreement is now available for entities that were not previously included in other licensing tiers, like as well as for internet service providers for the areas that are outside of their service footprints. And you can join the fabric data to the availability data, again, consistent with the permitted uses for the fabric data allowed for in the license agreement. We're also looking into possibly making more of the data available with fewer restrictions in the future, but for now, that is the best way to kind of do that association. We received a question, would it be possible to modify the mapping tool so that there is a toggle switch that turns the hexagons on and off? Not currently. As you zoom out, it really becomes quite impossible to see individual points. The hexagons are designed and they do show you a % of coverage to identify areas with greater or lesser availability. But users can, again, download the availability data and with a fabric license, map the location points themselves if they wish. Another question before I turn it over to the subject matter experts again. Would it be possible to modify the mapping tool so the location ID is shown by address? So when you click on the location challenge link on the map for a location, the unique location ID for the point does populate in the pop-up modal. So that's one easy way to obtain the location ID from the map viewer. Chelsea, a question for you. Can a state submit multiple bulk challenges over several different days leading up until January 13th?
Yes, states may submit multiple bulk challenge submissions in the BDC system. That is fine. And as a reminder, the January 13th date is the time that NTIA has asked that challenges be submitted so that the FCC can adjudicate challenges before the BEAD allocations are made. However, as I mentioned earlier, the challenge processes for the BDC maps, the National Broadband Map, they are ongoing and iterative, and therefore states and other challengers can continue to submit bulk challenges at any time, even after that January 13th date.
Thanks, Chelsea. Kirk, a question for you. Who will evaluate consumer challenges, and can you talk about the determining criteria?
Yeah, so the individual consumer challenges follow a similar path as the bulk challenges in the sense that they come in, they're subject to a high-level review, and then if accepted, are forwarded on to the relevant provider for us, who has 60 days to respond to either accept or oppose the challenge. And then if those that are opposed go into a second 60-day period during which we expect the providers to work with the challengers to try to resolve the challenge if possible. And then those that don't resolve in that process come to us, the FCC, for resolution. In that second 60-day period, we do hope that there will be a very constructive dialogue between challengers so that any challenges that are based on misunderstandings or absence of relevant facts on the part of the challenger, that those can be clarified and resolved that way. But those that don't will come to us. Note that the Broadband Data Act required us to create a consumer-friendly challenge process. And so we do have a different burden of proof, initial burden of proof for consumers. We're required to meet a preponderance of the evidence evidence level for their challenge to be advanced. And we do try to make the processes as flexible and accessible as it can be, consistent with getting effective challenges and resolving them effectively.
Thanks, Kirk. A follow-up question, will delivery speeds be considered as part of the bulk challenge process?
No, fixed speed tests are not used to support a fixed challenge. They can be submitted as crowdsourced data for consideration by commission staff and on potential areas of concern or problems in the data. They can also be submitted as informal complaints through the existing Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau complaint system, where they'll be served on providers and follow that pathway, but they're not accepted in the broadband data collection as a challenge basis for a challenge.
Thanks, Kirk. Chelsea, a question for you. We have a few business locations that we provide fiber in, not showing up as broadband serviceable locations. Would that be a one-off challenge using the new map, or a bulk challenge, the CSV file method?
Yeah, it's a good question. So if an ISP serves certain locations that it is not seeing as broadband serviceable locations in the Fabric data set or on the map, they should actually submit a Fabric challenge, also known as a location challenge, and not a fixed availability challenge. They can do that either as individual challenge directly from the map, or as a bulk challenge. I would refer users to our other video and other resources we have on our Help Center website on the Fabric challenge process, and how to submit that information. And we are, since today we're trying to focus really on those fixed availability challenges for this webinar, but we do have a number of resources available for that. But in general, if users are seeing things that they think are wrong with the location itself, that would be a Fabric challenge.
Thanks, Chelsea. I may try and take this next one. Many of the addresses that should be targeted in our availability challenge are likely to be wireless. These services may have a limited customer base, i.e. the services claim to be available, but very few are subscribed. What is acceptable to prove that the reported technology is not available at that site? And what if the service is available, but not at the reported speed? So taking that kind of in reverse order, as Kirk was just saying a minute ago, delivered speed is not the basis of a formal challenge. That information can be submitted as bulk crowdsourced data. But if it's just about, the maximum advertised speed is not actually being delivered at a location, that does not form the basis of a challenge. If, however, a provider, has reported that a certain speed is available at a location, but then you call and try and obtain that service, and the provider says, well, actually, we can't make that speed available to you. We can only make a lower tiered speed available to you. That would form the basis of a challenge, and that would be information that could be submitted. In terms of, what's acceptable to prove that the reported technology is not available at a site, it does depend on the methodology that you use for your bulk challenge. Again, you can submit information that you've aggregated from individual end users, in which case, you have to kind of meet the requirements of the data specification for that methodology. Alternatively, if you happen to have information about infrastructure, such as, if you have knowledge about where fixed wireless towers are, the spectrum bands the company's using, propagation models, things of that nature, that might be another mechanism, but you would have to describe with some detail your knowledge of the infrastructure if you were going to use that methodology to submit your bulk fixed availability challenge. Chelsea, a question for you. When we search by state, our state is showing 100% covered. Digging into this, one of the satellite provider is showing that they can serve via satellite at a speed of 350 megabits download and 40 megabits upload. Is there a way to filter out satellite from the fixed broadband so that they can see underserved areas, I'm assuming as defined by NTIA?
Yes, so on the map, you can click on the little gear icon in the upper right-hand side of the page, and this will allow you to customize your view and choose the technologies and speeds that you are interested in seeing displayed. So that is a powerful tool to use with the map.
Absolutely. And just one additional note on that, while you can use the gear icon to filter the map itself, we do just want to note that the bar chart to the side of it on percent of units covered, that does remain static. So just a note that you will not see that kind of shift dynamically as you're changing the filters above. But again, you can change it on the map itself, and you can always download the data and work with data in kind of in a CSV format. But just something to flag there. So Chelsea, another question for you: how am I able to associate the downloaded data to the locations that I'm wanting to challenge?
Right. So as I explained earlier, you would need to obtain a license to access the Fabric data set. Once you have that license and you've accessed the Fabric data, you can perform a join of the location ID field in the Fabric data set to location ID field in the availability data set that you've downloaded from the map. And we have information on how to obtain the Fabric license at the BDC Help Center page, which is the fcc.gov/broadbanddata/help.
Thanks, Chelsea. Kirk, a question for you. Why or how come documented evidence is not required from an individual challenger? I was expecting documented history from the individual is provided in their challenge.
So this goes back to the notion of it being a consumer-friendly challenge process. We know that people with all levels of understanding of this area will be making challenges, and so we wanted to provide flexibility for those people to present their challenge in a way that was work best for them. Having said that, depending on the type of challenge that they are making, certain information is forced to be submitted in order to proceed with the challenge. We don't require individuals to upload a file as evidence, but they do have to provide us with a description. And I will note that the clearest and most detailed challenges likely have the best chance of success.
Thanks, Kirk. Chelsea, another question for you. The availability challenge map indicates whether a point has been challenged. As a statewide broadband office, are we able to access map services like a live data feed of this status info? We want to track the challenge status to ensure our outreach is effective and for other reasons.
So for the moment, we have not enabled API-driven or other map services access for the data that's on the National Broadband Map. However, API access that would allow parties to get status updates pertaining to challenges and other information is a functionality that we are actively working to make available in the future. So stay tuned for that.
Thanks. Another question for you. Are downloadable maps with the Polygon data set by state available? And if so, where?
So downloads of GIS polygons for the fixed broadband availability data on the map are not available. They are available for the mobile coverage maps, but not for fixed. Keep in mind that many of the ISPs submitted their availability data as a list of locations and not as a coverage polygon. So the raw, in a lot of cases, the raw data that came into us was not in a polygon format, and those that did submit polygons, the data was converted to those location points. And then trying to publish the data set as a GIS file by state, would be very inefficient because there are a lot of there are multiple provider technology and speed combinations. So it would be difficult to capture all of that in statewide polygons. We suggest filtering the data by a unique list of geographies, and then joining that to geospatial data that matches what you're looking for, whether that's the fabric points themselves or other census geographies.
Thanks, Chelsea. We received a question about analytics software and potential examples of software that could be used to do some of this work, and whether there's funding to purchase this software. We can't speak to funding for the software. The FCC doesn't make funding available for that purpose, as far as I'm aware, though. You may want to, if you were a state, for example, you may want to check with NTIA about whether some of the planning grants for purposes of BEAD could be used for some of this. But there are a number of open source software packages that do not require expensive purchases that can be used for this. For some of this work, for geospatial software, you could use PostGIS or PostGIS, QGIS, QGIS, and the GeoPandas library of Python. For general data analysis, there are also a number of open source SQL options, such as Postgres SQL. But in addition to those software options, we've also are aware of a number of states partnering with academic institutions in their state. Universities, for example, there is an example we know of, I believe, the Earth Data Analysis Center at the University of New Mexico has been working with some of the ISPs and other stakeholders in their state to help provide support for data analysis. We're also, I believe that the Bureau of Indian Affairs can make free Esri licenses available to tribal nations. So there are some other relationships and partnerships that may be available to either get you software or provide you with personnel and software to help do some of this analysis. So there have been a lot of kind of creative and innovative relationships that have come out of this process to try and pair subject broadband experts with data experts to analyze the data on kind of a more broad basis. Let's see, a question for you, Kirk. Can you talk about what counts as a non-standard equipment or connection charge? Would a demand for an excess connect charge be something that might fall into that? For example, a provider requires a more expensive antenna and a 2-year contract. Is that like a non-standard connection charge that would potentially count for purposes of submitting that category of challenge?
Yeah, so what that is getting at is if the provider is charging the customer something that they're not automatically charging everyone else, or something beyond that automatic charge. So it's as compared to what the provider does with other customers. We haven't looked at that specific situation, and there's going to be lots of different permutations on this. But if, for example, in your example, a customer is being told that in order to make this connection, you not everybody else are having to get this special antenna, then I think that's certainly something that could serve as the basis for a challenge. And we'd have to look at the facts to come up with a decision on how to handle that.
Thanks, Kirk. Another question for you. Can a state accept individual challenges by phone potentially and enter them into the data specification? And if they did some sort of survey like that, who would be certifying in that instance?
Sorry. So I have to say we hadn't thought about that, I don't think, but I think that's possible. The certifying party would be the representative of the state. And if they were able to gather all of the requisite evidence and put it in a file and certify to it, I think that's a legitimate challenge. But again, it's a first impression for me.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think that, you would want to make sure that the representatives making the calls to individuals, are getting all of the information required based on the category of challenge. But if they kind of follow the data specification and collect all of the necessary fields, I don't see why you couldn't do it over the phone versus, a web form or some other platform that you're using to aggregate information from individual challengers. Chelsea, a question for you. Can you explain the filtering a little more? For many of the files that are available for download are larger than what Microsoft Excel can handle.
That is correct. So there are the preset filters that I had mentioned available from the map, either data by provider for the whole country or by state and technology for fixed broadband. And then we would recommend opening those files, working with them in another type of database software to do the filtering for different providers or different speeds or geographies. And then if you kind of isolate that smaller set, that could probably, might be something you could work with in Excel at that point. And I think, making data available at different filters is something we, may consider doing in the future.
Thanks, Chelsea. Another question for you. Sorry, I lost my place. Is the current BDC map the June 30th, 2022 data with upload information only? Asked another way, does the map include any changes from the initial download of BDC production data from June 2022?
No, so the map shows the availability data submitted by providers with it as of date of June 30th of this year. And the map, it was published on November 18th, and the data has not been updated since then. At some point, we will publish an update that would reflect any changes that, if ISPs have filed any corrections to that June 30th data in the meantime, and we sort of push those out to the map, as well as, reflect information on challenges will also be reflected in the map. Then further off in 2023, after the next round of availability data for data as of December 31st is collected, and then eventually that will be published. But for now, the data is as of June 30th, and then updates to that June 30th data set will be published periodically, kind of pushed out to the public.
Thanks, Chelsea. So we only have about 3 minutes left. I'm going to take a couple of questions and then give Chelsea and Kirk an opportunity to go through and see if there are additional questions beyond the ones that I take that are really hot topics that we should try and address here. But again, if we didn't get to your question today, you can resubmit it to the BDC Help Center to the extent that you aren't able to find the answer in one of the existing knowledge base articles, web videos, or other resources available in the Help Center. A question about the various tiers of fabric license agreements. So this is just we have a couple of different tiers. This was set out in our contracting documents that we use, which the statement of work that we issued for obtaining the fabric data is a publicly available document. I can't really get into any of the specifics too much, but we did, seek proposals for different categories of licensees, I believe. One of them is us, the FCC. Another one is internet service providers and governmental entities. A third category are other federal agencies. And then the fourth category is anyone else who wants to participate in the BDC in kind of a bulk manner, who doesn't fall into one of those other categories. So when we talk about tiers of licensees, it's just different. It's based on, where you sit and kind of your position in this process. A question about repeating. Can you please repeat what the first challenge was? The challenge 2, I think this was the first methodology. Methodology 2 was information collected from individual consumers. The first methodology was knowledge of infrastructure. Let's see. And then one more question before I turn it over to Chelsea and Kirk. Will the map that will be used for BEAD include the March 1st, 2023 BDC filing? If not, how are all of the missing locations that are being challenged going to be included in the map? I would just note that, this is the decision about what kind of snapshot of the map is used for BEAD is a question for NTIA. We don't want to speak on behalf of them. We collaborate with them closely on the data and on the BDC more broadly, but in terms of when they decide to look at what version of the map for purposes of setting initial allocations for BEAD, that is a question for them, and we wouldn't want to get out in front of them and speak to that. So with that, why don't I start with Chelsea? Chelsea, were there any other questions you saw that we should try and pick up?
So there's a question here about that we have to pull the data by technology and submit challenges by technology. I wanted to clarify that even though we make the data available for download by state, and by technology, also separately by provider, you do not have to submit your challenges in that same way. And so you can, you don't have to submit challenges to multiple technologies if you don't want to, or for multiple providers in an area. You can, really focus on the location and the provider, the technology, the speed, the information that you're interested in challenging, and kind of limit it down to that. Just because the files are available in that way for download doesn't mean they have to be uploaded that way. And then there's another question: are we to include satellite and wireless in a challenge, or just focus on wired? So challenges to satellite and terrestrial fixed wireless, they are considered as part of this bulk fixed availability challenge process. And so those challenges to those services can be submitted via the map or via bulk upload. Individual challenges to mobile service, those information for those should be submitted via the FCC's speed test app. And that is available for download on the Apple and the iOS and Android app stores.
Thanks, Chelsea. Those are good call outs. Kirk, I know we're a minute over, but any pressing questions you think, anyone you want to sneak in before we close for the day?
Yeah, lots of great questions here. Very helpful to us to get these. One that I will go over. What if a carrier shows a fixed wireless service on the availability map and you know they don't serve the area, but can't prove whether they have infrastructure or not? We called to request service for several addresses. They list available, and the response was service is not available at the locations, but you can request to be put on the waiting list. So you do not have to base your challenge on infrastructure, and what you've described there, at least on paper, sounds like a legitimate basis for a challenge, and how you document that, is there's some flexibility, but again, I would just be as clear and detailed as you can in laying that out, and that's it.
Great. Well, thank you again, Chelsea and Kirk, for the presentations and all the Q&A. And thank you all for joining us. We appreciate it. I just want to put in one more plug for the BDC Help Center. That is fcc.gov/broadband data/help. There are a lot of materials available there. And there will be more materials added going forward in the days and weeks to come. So, and you can also, again, click on the Get Help link, I believe, and submit a question that will be answered by a knowledgeable staff member. So with that, thank you so much and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.